From inside the Banner offices along the Inner Harbor, it is the Banner Baseball Show. Paul Mancano and John Meoli live on a Tuesday in June to talk about the Baltimore Orioles. We are going to discuss Jordan Westburg perhaps being the glue to this Orioles team, as interim manager Tony Mansolino suggested. We are also going to discuss the option of outfielder Heston Kjerstad to Triple-A Norfolk and what that could mean for his future. Well, of course, we'll do our minor league check-in with one of John's favorite prospects. All that and much, much more. But first, let's get a quick word from our sponsor.
For the fifth year in a row, Toyota is the best resale value brand according to Kelley Blue Book's KBB.com, including the 2025 Grand Highlander, best in resale value for midsize SUVs. Toyota, let's go places.
All right, John, before we get into our meat of the podcast, we should, of course, shout out a review that we got on Apple Podcasts. If you write us a 5-star review, I will read it out here on the show. Got one from Mark H. Orioles referencing our episode last week that I did with Danielle Allentuck and Lee Sanderlin about their stories on the BaltimoreBanner.com, where you can subscribe $1 for 6 months. They detailed the unraveling of former Orioles pitcher Brian Mattis. And Mark's review reads, "The episode on Brian M. was extraordinarily compelling and just a byproduct of great journalism in an age where journalism standards have eroded and quality products are getting more difficult to find. Well done. There's an art to great journalism, which includes vetting sources, multiple corroborations, and conclusions drawn from the facts." A well thought out, well said review from Mark.
Yeah, Mark. I was just looking at your screen to find out his name so I could say hard Sam, Mark. Hard Sam.
I doubt his last name is actually Orioles, but his middle name could be H. Could begin with an H.
Yeah, I mean, that would be a weird like custom jersey if he had Orioles on the back too.
That would be a weird one. Thank you for the review. Of course, I will read out a 5-star review. So write us one. Give us a thumbs up anywhere that you are watching or listening to the Banner Baseball Show. All right, John, let's talk about the O's. They are currently 11 games under 500. They're 30-41. They are 6.5 games out of the second wild card spot. Every time I want to go on a podcast and declare the Orioles are back or say that the Orioles are storming back, they go ahead and lose a game like they did last night in Tampa, 7-1, where they get absolutely dominated by a starting pitcher, and they just can't seem to build any momentum. But it's like you said, I believe 2 weeks ago, last week, every loss feels like 2 losses. Every win feels like half a win because of the ground that they have to make up in such a short amount of time. And the sweep over the weekend felt awesome. Felt like this is the Orioles team they thought they were putting together when they dominated the Angels in 3 games. And finally, the offense really broke out. But every time they seem to get hot, one loss will just set them back in such a way that it feels insurmountable to come back.
Yeah, gosh, this is, that didn't feel like a 4-2 homestand because of how like the first part went. Like I personally did this to myself, but I was convinced that like Thursday would be the day. Like everybody's back. Yeah, it's Scooble. Yeah, they can't hit lefties. But this team is mostly back, and like that was going to be the occasion for them to say, all right, like we're done playing around. We've been bad. We've had some issues. We are not going to be bad anymore because we're going to come in here and we're going to beat Terry Scooble. And they didn't. And I thought that was annoying. And then they went out and beat 2 lefties and swept the Angels, who are not the Tigers. Let's not kid ourselves. But what these wins do is I guess you're basically trying to like, reinforce the floor of like, yes, you can lose a game. And now instead of losing a game and going back 12 games under 500, you can be 11. And if they split this series, they'll still be 10, and that'll be good. And then if they go to Texas and they win that series, it'll be 8 or 9. And like, you just have to, I guess at this point, make sure that you're not falling too far back when you have those losses. But this is what it's going to be. Yesterday it was like winners of 4 of 5. And like, I have it here right in front of me. It was, and 10 of 15 and like 13 of 20, and then they lose and it doesn't feel good, but all those other things are still good. And I don't know what the solution to that is going to be. I think we said last week they could either just like lose a bunch of games and it could be over, or they just keep doing this. But this is the trajectory that they've needed to be on. Like, we're saying that they need to win basically 2/3 of their games to feel like they can make the playoffs. And over a 2-3 week period, they've basically done that. So like it feels as good as it can until they lose, and then it stops feeling good until they win again.
Yeah, I think when all is said and done at the end of this year, we'll be able to clearly define the season into chunks. The first part of the season deserves its own chunk. The time when the team was still managed by Brandon Hyde and all of the injuries hit them at once. Kyle Gibson is still on the roster. We'll call that the Kyle Gibson era. We can define that as a chunk. Then we can define the beginning of the Tony Mansolino era. And I'm wondering if the second chunk of the season that we're currently in is going to look a whole lot. It looks different for sure. It definitely looks different from the first part of the season. They are healthier. We're seeing the guys that we thought we'd see in the lineup more consistently. We're seeing the starting pitching look more like itself. Frankly, we're seeing the bullpen perform phenomenally. That has been perhaps the most surprising and most appreciated part of all this. But it has to look drastically different. It has to look as good as the first chunk of the season looked bad.
Yeah, I mean, I think we might actually just have to call it the Cianel Perez era, because he was DFA'd between those games on that Saturday in Boston.
Yeah, that's a good delineation.
And I'm pretty sure that they have like all the good moments that have come from this team. And it's always weird when you're splitting out like, oh, XOX, like in their X and X in their last like however many games. It's like, it feels very weird and disingenuous, because it is very weird and disingenuous to pick the middle of a doubleheader in which it got destroyed in the first. Is that what that got destroyed in the first game of that, right?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. And like, it feels very disingenuous to do that, but like, that is the moment that like things turn. And I'm pretty sure that's when he got designated for assignment. So like, it is very unfair to him, but like, that is also what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Like, and when I say that, we're talking about, somebody who was very, very good for this team for a very long time. And his role this year was to be either the first or the second guy out of the bullpen when things had gone terribly, which they did not every other game, but like once every 3 games for sure. Things just went like completely sideways. And that's going to be how we remember that era of this team. That was the beginning of this. They would lose terribly because they would go down early, and they would those deficits would get larger and they wouldn't hit. And then we're in a different we're just in a different era right now. It's crazy. There's been a lot of discourse. There's been some people who are saying that like when this team was whole, they would be good again. I'd like to speak for them because I am one of them, and it feels a little good to have what's happened recently.
Has there ever been a team in recent history that has been more roller coaster-y in the way that these clear defining moments set the course for the coming months? I mean, I think of, the Adley Rutschman call up is the first one where Adley gets called up, and then all of a sudden they go on a hot streak and almost make the playoffs in 2022. And then 2023, that's all its own moment. That was all great. That's all a high. But 2024, great for the first half. Jordan Westburg breaks his hand. I think that's a moment that you could note as a clear defining moment.
Yeah.
And then they're 500 the rest of the way. And this season, it's being broken out into chunks. And maybe the post Cianel Perez era will be better to the Orioles than the Cianel Perez era itself.
Yeah. And I'm just going through this right now because I feel like we've got to be close to it. I feel like if we're going to talk about like the high water mark of all high water marks, it was when the Orioles went in last year and stopped the Yankees.
Yeah.
And like killed Luis Hill, and not killed for real, but like, Thursday, June 20th. What's today? The 17th.
That was the Sunday night baseball game. I believe?
The Thursday. It was like a Thursday afternoon game.
Oh, okay.
It was Thursday afternoon. Yeah. The Sunday night baseball game, they beat the Phillies, and that was like, all right, like,
yeah,
cool. But then they go to New York and they do that. And like, we're a year out from like what was clearly the high water mark. And I don't think this team is anywhere near that team or what that was, but to think about, the extremes, we're only going to continue to feel that in the near term, like as long as the Orioles are in the position they're in, where every win feels so desperately needed and every loss feels so impactful. Like that's only going to continue. But I think there's a real part of this where these swings are kind of part of the deal until you win something real and, like, you're accustomed to winning and you are a winner, you know, there's not a huge difference in the standings between, like, the Orioles and the Braves. I think the Braves are, like, a couple games better, but, like, I'm not, like, immersed in the Braves discourse, but I think it's probably a little bit different because they've won and, like, they have players who have won, and there's a little more ability to be like, this will probably turn out okay." But,
Right.
like, you don't have that backstop with the Orioles.
Exactly. If 2023 had been more prolonged, if their success had been more prolonged, you would feel better about this stretch. You'd feel more confident in their ability to string together some wins. But the fact that we are just going on now close to 12 months of 500 or worse baseball is certainly gives you not good feelings going forward.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's talk about the struggles of one Heston Kjerstad because he is a former top prospect in the Orioles system, a former number 2 overall pick by the Orioles in 2020, and he was having just a horrendous season, and that's why the Orioles sent him down to Triple-A Norfolk. He was hitting 192 with 4 homers, a 566 OPS, negative 1.4 baseball reference WAR in 54 games. John, we have seen so many prospects come up to Baltimore and struggle immediately. Adley Rutschman didn't hit a home run for his first 6 weeks. Gunnar Henderson lit the world on fire in his first month and then struggled to start the 2023 season. Ryan Mountcastle had struggles at the start of his first full big league season. Jackson Holliday went 1 for 32 for 32 or whatever it was before he got optioned last year. 2 for 31, 2 for 34. I can't remember exactly at
It
this
wasn't
point.
good.
It wasn't Chris Davis, but it wasn't great. He gets optioned back down. Kobe Mayo has had struggles before he seems to finally be finding his feet in the big league. Heston Kjerstad, his first 2 tastes of big league ball went well. He got a little bit of run at the end of the 2023 season, got some run in 2024, was expected to play more before a concussion kept him out, and then he came back and didn't look quite right. 2025 was supposed to be the year that Heston Kjerstad was going to get an extended runway. He makes the opening day roster. This is his chance to show he is going to be part of the Orioles outfield long term. And things started out poorly and they just kept getting worse. And 54 games in, the Orioles decided this guy needed a reset. I picked him as one of my potential breakout candidates for the Orioles this season. I did not see this kind of these kind of struggles coming from Heston Kjerstad. And the problem is because he doesn't bring anything defensively, at least positively, and because he doesn't bring anything on the base paths, he has to hit in order to prove his value to this team. And he could not hit in his time in the big leagues for the first couple months.
Yeah, it was a pretty challenging start to the season for him. I think that's pretty clear. I am I am of 2 minds. Like, I think there's a lot of examples of, like, this happening and guys going to figure it out. I think that, I've said before, there's a lot of different things about Heston Kjerstad that there are from your typical Orioles hitting prospect in that he's not necessarily like a swing decision machine. He's not somebody who's going out and, putting together good at bat. He's somebody who has the ability to barrel up the baseball and hit it really far when he does that, and he gets the bat to a lot of things, and that is a skill that can carry you so far. There's somebody else he's now sharing a lineup with in Triple-A, Samuel Basallo, who is the same way. He hits the snot out of the ball, and it doesn't really matter where you pitch it. If he's on the pitch and knows what's coming, he's gonna hit it a mile. I remember the first time I saw Basallo play, it was in Fredericksburg in, like, low A, and he hit a ball that was, like, a foot above the strike zone and, like, 6 inches outside, like, out the opposite field. Like, he just crushed it, and, like and I was talking to somebody in the organization after, they, like, sent him the video, and they were, like, they answered back, like, "Cool, sick, dude. Like, why'd you swing at that pitch?" Like, that's the type of stuff that happens, when you can do that, and Heston Kjerstad's been able to do that his entire career. And the idea that it didn't work in the majors is like, okay, now let's see what happens. And he was not going to get even the kind of run that he got, unless the circumstances were completely different. Tyler O'Neill goes down for all of May. Colton Cowser goes down the first weekend of the season. We wouldn't Is it better to not know, or is it better to know and be able to figure it out? Because there's a scenario when the Orioles might not be, 11 games under 500 in the scenario, but there's a scenario where Heston Kjerstad is still living the Heston Kjerstad Kyle Stowers life and, like, getting 8 at bats a week and kind of playing, kind of not, and coming in to face some guy who's, like, breathing fire and throwing, like, 99 in the 8th inning, and that's your at bat for the day. Like, that could be his life, and we'd still be like, "I don't know, maybe he needs to work on this, maybe he should play more." Now we do. We don't like the answer, like, it's not a good answer at this point, but for him and the Orioles, there's now a part where you can say, "Okay, this is what happened," like, and now I think you also know that, like, you really need to hit because your profile defensively is not one that can support you not hitting. Like, really go down there and hit.
Yeah, and I just wonder what an option can do for him because this is not an instance where he needs to prove anything in Triple-A, but now he has significant amounts of tape to go through. He has a significant amount of experience to go through and determine what exactly went wrong. And when you have somebody who is as aggressive and swinging as he is, I mean, his walk rates were fine in his limited sample size in 2023 and 2024. This year, 3.6% walk rate. He was swinging at just about everything. Like he said, not a swing decision monster. When he gets a hold of a ball, he can make it go far,
Yeah.
but he was rarely making solid contact. For the first couple months of the season, he wasn't pulling anything. He wasn't hitting much squarely. A lot of the stuff was softly hit, and it was softly hit the other way, and it would be a can of corn for a left fielder.
Yeah.
How do they get Heston Kjerstad back to being a power hitter who pulls the ball hard and in the air?
I think that there's a couple things, right? To use an example of another player, I think we've seen so far in this iteration of Kobe Mayo being in the big leagues that, and this is something he's dealt with from the time he was in Bowie, all the way through the minors, is that, like, you need to be able to handle, like, pitches, like, on the outer half, but, like, don't swing at them. Don't swing at them. And Kobe Mayo, when he was in Bowie in 2 years ago, basically, like, led a hitters meeting. Like, they were all in the cage, and they were like, "Oh, man, I gotta figure out how to, like, handle this, like, down and away slider." And it's like, handle it by not swinging at it. He was like, "Why are we swinging at this pitch?" And Kobe Mayo, in this instance of being in the big leagues, is doing a little better job of laying off those pitches, and he's making pitches come to him, and he's hitting the ball hard in the air. The type of things you didn't see in the first couple snaps. You're starting to see it now. So I think for Heston Kjerstad to be the best version of himself, to pull the ball in the air, to pull the ball with power. It's like, yes, you can defend late in the bat when when you're dealing with, like, outer half channeling and, like, spin going away from you. But one thing that the Orioles, I think it's fair to say, tolerated, um, because I don't think accepted is the right word. I think they tolerated him swinging all the different kinds of pitches that he did because he was able to handle them and he had a plan. It wasn't like, "I'm only gonna focus middle in here." It's like, if this guy floats a changeup and it's up and away, I'm gonna swing, and if they come inside with a fastball, I'm going to swing too. And I think it's just closing off some of those options because pitchers in the big leagues can do all of those things that might be able to get you, and it's a matter of saying, "Okay, I'm going to let you have that. If you wanna, like, locate a slider on, like, the outside corner, go for it. Go for it. You're not gonna get those calls every time. You're not gonna land it exactly where you want to every time, but I'm not gonna help you." And Heston Kjerstad needs to get out of the business of helping pitchers. I think there's been some moments on the broadcasts over the course of the season, and Ben McDonald's made the point a couple times that it's all well and good to hit the ball hard, but if you're hitting pitchers' pitches hard, you are not doing what you want to do. And I think there's some validity to that. I think there's probably some areas where people would push back, but I think Heston Kjerstad is firmly in the category of, like, if you're doing what the pitcher wants you to do, you are not doing what you wanna do, and I think he needs to figure out, for one not for one, for once, what his real thing is going to be, because can he go out there and just start, like, cranking pull side homers and be a guy who focuses on power and does that? Absolutely, but can you do that when you are constantly swinging at pitches that you can't pull for power? The answer is no, and I think that's the area where he needs to be working now.
I love that comparison to Kobe Mayo and the discussion about him hosting that hitters meeting because that is what really hurt Kobe Mayo early in his big league career was he would go down 0-1 on a slider low and away, and it would be then probably an off-speed pitch inside, nothing he could handle. He's down 0-2.
Yeah.
And when you are consistently behind in at-bats, Jackson Holliday is another great example. Holliday, I think, last year, it felt like every pitch in the shadow zone around the strike zone last year was getting called for a strike on Jackson Holliday. I don't know what it was, whether it was a rookie strike zone, whatever. But Jackson Holliday was going down in counts so often, and he has gotten so much better at working counts this year, and to his benefit. He's gotten so much better at jumping on the first pitch this year and doing damage with it. It's something that Holliday worked through. It's something that Mayo is working through now, and it's something that Heston Kjerstad is going to have to do because you're just not going to get hittable pitches if you are consistently behind in the count. And for Heston Kjerstad, if that's something, hopefully that is something that he can work on in Triple-A. It's difficult because the competition level is so much lower, but it's clear that the Orioles believe that he wasn't benefiting anymore from seeing such devastating pitchers as he was seeing in the big leagues.
Yeah, and I think to keep it on Heston Kjerstad for a second, then I have a broader point that I think you were getting to. I'm almost looking for, and I have no idea how it's gone last week. I'm not really paying attention to the daily progress of Heston Kjerstad's test. Like, I almost want to see like a weird stat line from him. Like Colton Cowser, when he went down, it got very like he did not in 2023. He did not have a good like rest of the season in Norfolk. He struck out a ton. He was not making as much contact. He was swinging a lot more, and that felt intentional because he was so in between in the big leagues of like, do I swing? Do I not swing? Do I almost was encouraged, and it doesn't seem like there was any kind of like real like, hey, swing at everything, be more aggressive, directive. But I was, as I was following that in that moment, I thought, all right, this is like, at least it's something different because there was an inciting. This is somebody who hit like 1,000 OPS all the way through the minors. If that happens in the big leagues, teams figure out how to expose him, and like it felt like he was swinging more and being more aggressive because that was the solution to the problem that the Matrix presented. So I want to see something weird happen with Heston Kjerstad. Like I want to see him. I don't know what the weird thing would be. Like I want to see him walk like 20% of the time because he's going to get those pitches. Like teams are going to try to make him chase. Just don't. Just don't. If you get punched out looking like once a game and you walk once a game and you don't really do a ton of like swing, that's not great, but do it. Who cares?
Yeah.
Let's have something weird happen. And I think, and I think to make a broader point of what you're talking about, and it's happened to pretty much everybody. Maybe not Adley Rutschman, probably not Jordan Westburg because he's just built different.
Jordan, as we're going to talk about,
built different, but there is a constant. There's a constant experience that these young Orioles hitters, as they're getting their first consistent taste of the big league, seem to have where those edges of the zone, those shadows, that stuff that those pitches that major league pitchers can make, and those pitches that are a little more tightly called by major league umpires, get these guys really in between because they spend their entire minor league career being rewarded for not swinging at them because those are not pitches that you can typically drive and do damage on. You cannot hit a ball hard in the air when it's on the outer hat, like on the edge of the plate, going away from you. So they don't swing at those for 2-3 years. They are patted on the back for not swinging at those. They're rewarded for not swinging at those, and then they get to the big leagues and they kind of have to swing at them, and they start swinging at them, and then then you're cooked. Like that's it. And it's not. I don't think that's a bad thing. That is how they're taught. It just feels like a symptom of the way that this is developed, where you don't get a chance to. Why would you want to practice swinging at bad pitches or pitchers' pitches? You wouldn't, but you do want to know what to do when you are seeing them. And I think sometimes this could be an opportunity for. It's been an opportunity in the past for guys to figure that out and be like, okay, this is how it's going to happen. Now I'm going to adjust, and for Heston Kjerstad, it's happened.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up also the weird stat lines that we saw from Colton Cowser when, remember, he came up in the middle of the 2023 season out of necessity. I believe it was, I can't remember who got injured.
Aaron Hicks and Cedric Mullins.
Right.
There's both hamstrings.
Yeah, and
both of them have both hamstring injuries. That would be incredibly painful and unlucky.
That would be terrible. Uh, I believe the Nationals had catcher was Alex Avila play second base one time for a game, and he, like, tore both his calves in the game because they were like, "Well, we need him to play second base," and then he played one game and, like, hurt both his calves.
That's what happens when you don't do it, it's like you quick burst.
Yep. So not both hamstrings at that time. But anyway, Colton Cowser comes up to the big leagues, struggles mightily, hits 115, gets sent back down to Triple-A. And then the rest of the way that season, Colton Cowser in Triple-A hit 233 with 53 strikeouts to 16 walks. It was like, what happened to Colton Cowser? Did they break his confidence? What is going on? His numbers were bad, but he was working on things. And when he showed up to spring training in 2024, he was a much better player all around, much better hitter, won the job out of spring training and kept it, and obviously finished second in Rookie of the Year voting. So what I would say is don't read too much into the Triple-A numbers when Heston Kjerstad is sent back down because I would rather his numbers look it's like spring training for a pitcher. I would rather his numbers look terrible and he's working on things than he continues to mash, but he's falling into the same habits that are going to hurt him when he comes back up here. I mean, Jackson Holliday last year, when he struggled so much out of the gate, they sent him back down to Triple-A. He went on the injured list, I believe, for a little bit as well, but he struggled as well. He at least to a degree that he had not done before. I mean, he hit 259 when he got sent back down to Triple-A, and it was like, okay, that maybe this isn't the same quite Jackson Holliday. What is going on here? You can't read too much into the box score when it comes to Triple-A and it comes to these top prospects who are working on things, who have the body of evidence now to go back, study their tape, work on things mechanically, try things in the batter's box. And so if Heston Kjerstad goes back down to Triple-A and hits 200 over the next month, that should not scare you. I don't think that Heston Kjerstad's long-term prospects have dimmed because of his demotion.
Yeah, it's just the moment of clarity that I think, um, if we're gonna bright side this, like I said, there's a world where this is, where Tyler O'Neill doesn't get hurt. It's not the world we live in.
Yeah,
But there's that world. There's a world where Colton Cowser doesn't dive in first base, and Heston Kjerstad has, instead of having however many 200 plate appearances this year, where you don't really love what happened. He has 80 right now, and you're still wondering what's going on, and he's not getting better. And now there's a chance for him to get better.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's talk about the subject of today's podcast, and that's Jordan Westburg, who, according to interim manager Tony Mansolino, said last month, is the glue to this whole thing. It's funny because Andy Kuska of the Baltimore Banner wrote last October when the Orioles were fighting for their lives in the playoffs against the Kansas City Royals that Jordan Westburg is the straw that stirs the drink. Whatever he is, the engine that car go. Whatever analogy you want to use for Jordan Westburg, I think is apt. Westburg started out the season very slowly, obviously was dealing with something, goes on the injured list with a hamstring strain, comes back about a week ago, and the Orioles are 500 since, but he is producing at the plate. He's hitting 333. He's got 3 homers. He's got 8 RBIs. He's got 3 walks. He is such an important piece to this Orioles lineup that it is getting hard to disagree with Tony Mansolino's logic. Adley Rutschman is crucial to the Orioles' success. We've talked about it a million times. When he is going well, the Orioles are going well. Gunnar Henderson is arguably, perhaps inarguably, the best player on the Baltimore Orioles. They need a rotation that is steady. Colton Cowser coming back from injury was also big. Jordan Westburg coming back from injury was hugely, hugely important for the long-term success of this team. If this team wanted to go anywhere this season, they needed Jordan Westburg back and healthy because of what he gives this team and why it's so different from what anyone else gives this team.
Yeah, and there's a lot of reasons why all the things that, Tony Mansolino and Andy said about him are true, but Jordan Westburg is it's because, and I think Tony Mansolino's explanation of why he said that is because he is so steady. He is so reliable, and that's not to say that other guys aren't. But and this is something I was gonna say stop me if you've heard this before, but I know you haven't. I'm not gonna ask you to stop me anyways, but there needs to be a quorum, a majority of those type of guys for a lineup to be good. That's if Adley Rutschman and Gunnar Henderson got hurt and it was just Jordan Westburg, kind of leading the charge, that might weigh on him. But he is such a floor raiser. He is so sturdy that this team is allowed to be its best self when he's out there. I think that comes with what he does defensively. I think that comes with the types of plate appearances he takes. Um, he is immune to the big moment-itis that some of these other hitters seem to have, and when you're able to do that, consistently, it makes things a lot easier. It makes a good team good, and that's a unique trait. There are guys I feel like what Jordan Westburg does at this stage of his career is unique because this is the type of stuff that, like, guys who have been in the big leagues for, like, 7, 8 years, like, these are the ways you talk about now. I'm thinking of, like, gosh, like Mike Lowell, was like a guy who just, like, was consistent and steady and played at third base in there every single day. The Nick Markakis, I think Nick Markakis was also kind of like that kind of guy early in his career too, so that might be a better comp.
How about Michael Young on the Rangers? Is that a good comp?
Exactly. I think if you Google Jordan Westburg, Michael Young, you might even find some, like, him looking at him as somebody who, like, he kinda was like those types of guys. It's
Yeah,
like,
that
you know
fits.
exactly what you're going to get every single game, every single week, every single month, every single year, and there are a lot of stats that back this up, and there's also a lot of, you know, you don't really need stats to know that, like, when Jordan Westburg is healthy, that this team is good.
Yeah. Speaking of that glue comparison, that
Yeah.
glue analogy that Tony Mansolino made, that when Jordan Westbrook came back, he spoke with the media and was asked what his reaction was to being called the glue to this whole thing, and here's what he had to say.
Yeah, I'd call him a liar to his face, but no, that's it's flattering, certainly. I'm one to try and keep the spotlight off myself and not think too highly of myself, So for somebody else, somebody who's manning this ship right now and who I have a really good relationship, it means a lot. It makes you feel good about yourself. It makes you feel like you're wanted and somewhat needed in this clubhouse, and it's a good place to be. It makes you feel comfortable, and yeah, man, I'm happy to play for that guy. I do a lot for him. I don't think there's a better guy right now to handle the situation that we've been put in, and yeah, looking forward to playing for him again.
Okay, first off, that is a pretty full-throated endorsement of Tony Mansolino, somebody who Jordan Westburg had never played a game under as the manager.
Yeah.
For him to step up and offer his thoughts on that, he wasn't there. He wasn't in the clubhouse. He was still hurt when Tony Mansolino took over, when Brandon Hyde was fired. And so he didn't talk then, but he did talk this time. And to give a full-throated endorsement of a guy who just took over the job, I think speaks to Jordan Westbrook's character. He is going to play hard for whoever is in front of him, and I give him a lot of credit for voicing that. And I think that is the kind of vocal leader that he can be on this team. He is somebody who goes out and shows it every day, but he also has the backing of somebody who has an together. It is his personality. It is his thing about Jordan Westburg that makes him the glue on this team. And I think sometimes glue guy can be a negative. It can often be when you say that about a player, it can sometimes be tinged as saying, well, he's not the best player on this team, but he keeps them together. Jordan Westburg was still an all-star last year. If he's fully healthy this year, he could have been an all-star. He is an incredibly talented player, but it is everything about Jordan Westburg that makes him crucial to this team. The culture, the clubhouse, everything.
Yeah, and I think part of that too is how these guys all came up together. From the moment that Jordan Westburg put on an Orioles uniform at Instructs in 2020, there was already a pretty good young shortstop on those fields, whose name was Gunnar Henderson, and like they immediately started pushing each other and got to the big leagues together from the moment that pretty quickly Jordan Westburg and Colton Cowser were together and they were balancing each other out, and Cowser was trying to do things that Westburg was doing, and Westburg was trying to be that model of consistency then, because he knew what he was doing worked, and he wanted his teammates and his friends to do it. All these guys pulled from Jordan Westburg in one way or another, and you end up with a player who, I think it's a good point too, that the types of players that you talk about in this way are not necessarily like always the best. I think you're either, one of the studs, or you're like one of the, you're either the star or you're in the chorus. And like, he seems like somebody who can do it all. And I think the fact that he's able to be talked about in this way at this stage of his career means that, in 10 years, you will talk about Jordan Westburg as one of those guys. Yeah, I made a couple all-star teams. Now you get him around all these young guys, and he'll show them how to take care of their bodies and what to do in the cage and all that stuff. And like, that's all well and good. But I think, and these guys are, around when they're injured, but it's just not the same. And I think that you can feel that type of stuff when somebody like Jordan Westburg, like you mentioned, the broken wrist and the hamstring stuff. He's here, he's in Baltimore, he's with the team, and that makes a difference. But you're just trying to stay out of the way and do your rehab, and there's no way to be that person like socially and emotionally if you're not playing. And there's a way to do that when you are, and he's doing it. He's being all those things, and he's hitting home runs. So,
and it's also interesting because he's not a swing decision monster in the way that other Orioles prospects have been.
Yeah.
Last year, despite being an all-star, he had less than 5% walk rate, which is bottom half of the league. So far this year, a little bit better in a tiny, tiny sample size, but 6.5 walk rate. So he's never going to walk a ridiculous amount of times. And he is going to strike out a fair amount of times as well. Never ridiculously above the league average, but right around the league average. But it is the fact that he makes contact, and the fact that, like you said, he doesn't clench up in late and close situations. Baseball Reference has that late and close clutch stat, which is defined as 7th inning or later, with the batting team tied or ahead by 1, or the tying run is on deck. So these are the moments of the game that are crucial.
Yeah.
And whether clutchness is a thing or not, Jordan Westburg has been clutch. He has performed very well in those situations. I'm going to throw out a lot of stipulations here for this criteria, for this stat here. But of players who have had at least 95 plate appearances in those late and close situations, active players, Jordan Westburg has the 5th highest OPS, 927, behind only Juan Soto, Aaron Judge, Will Smith, and Fernando Tatis Jr. He is 2nd in batting average in those late and close situations, 316, behind only Stephen Kwan, who's one of the highest batting average guys in the league consistently. So having somebody who hits in the clutch, the Orioles have been much maligned this year for not hitting with runners on base, not hitting with runners in scoring position, not hitting in critical moments of the game. Jordan Westburg does all of that, and that's why he's so important right now for this team.
Yeah, and I think those are again extensions of just having another good player in there. He's different for what he brings off the field, but he's also really impactful in those situations. I was looking at, I forgot what time period I had filtered it out for, but I kind of expected like there to be this drastic thing, but I looked at like runners in scoring position and like hitting lefties. I think it might have been just last week or this little like 3-week like goodness stretch, and the Orioles were like league average on both. It was like 102 WRC plus for one, like 101 on the other, and it's thinking like that's still so much better than it was. That like
Michael Eyes would give his right arm to be average.
They might as well like hang a flag at the ballpark for it, like a banner. Like how, but that's the type of thing that Jordan Westburg and having your players back can do. We were sitting here last week saying only one of Gary Sanchez's 2 home runs were off lefties, but I think I was saying like, what if in 3 weeks he has 3 home runs off lefties and his OPS off lefties is like 800 again, like it's supposed to be. Like, this is the type of stuff that happens slowly and also not slowly. And I think having, to bring it back to Jordan Westburg, I think there's going to be a time, and I've tried to say this as much as I can now, just to make myself not a hypocrite, or to follow my own advice. But I think there's going to be a time when, and this will really only happen if the Orioles actually win something, when this team will be remembered and kind of viewed more as collective. Like, yes, they were all these like first round picks and all these 1-1s and all these stars, but the strength is them together. And we have such a body of evidence that, it is also about Jordan Westburg. And even though Colton Cowser's not been at his best since he came back, it is also about Colton Cowser. And it is going to be about Heston Kjerstad when the time comes. It could still be about Kobe Mayo, Jackson, like all these guys together is going to be the strength of this. And I think that no one's going to embody that more than Jordan Westburg.
Yeah, well said. All right, we are going to do our minor league check-in. We're going to talk about an outfield prospect that John has done quite a lot of work with.
Yeah, Beavs.
Written quite a lot about over the years. But first, let's get a quick word from our sponsor.
For the 5th year in a row, Toyota is the best resale value brand according to Kelley Blue Book's KBB.com, including the 2025 Grand Highlander, best in resale value for midsize SUVs. Toyota, let's go places.
All right, John, it is minor league check-in time, and it's time to talk about outfielder Dylan Beavers. 23 years old, former number 33 overall pick in the 2022 MLB draft. That was the draft where Jackson Holliday went number 1.
Heard of him.
Hitting .304 is Dylan Beavers with 5 homers and an .847 OPS, 17 stolen bases in Triple-A Norfolk. He's been playing mostly right field, a little bit of left, only 6 games in center. Judd Fabian has mostly been the center fielder in Norfolk because he is the stronger center fielder there. John, you've written countless pieces about Dylan Beavers. Swing school is, let me tell you, he is, I don't know what the tuition is for swing school, but Dylan Beavers has got to be in serious debt for the amount of classes that he has, the amount of credits he has racked up.
He was the one who was, he was a TA. I was like I was the guy that was like not really doing all the work. He was like grading all the papers and like, giving all the lectures, and I was just there. It was really funny. We did that in 2023 and it was really interesting because like, it was really interesting to kind of go through that process with him, because even when we first spoke in, I guess, the end of that draft year, he was so clearly into everything that the Orioles did hitting wise, mechanics wise. There were teams that were like not put off, but were surprised. He went to the scouting combine that year and was basically like open with teams like, yeah, like I'm pretty terrible. Like I need a lot of work. They were like, excuse me, don't you want to get picked in the first round? But we did that process. To kind of outline all the work and all the mechanical stuff and all the changes that he was going to make over the course of the season. And it started to take hold, as the season went on. It was really fascinating. We're, talking about something that was a couple years ago, so the details might be a little fuzzy, but I would go to Aberdeen all the time and I would see him and it would look like he was thinking like, okay, I'm going to do this movement here. And you could see that he would change within a game. Even like he would be mechanical and then he would be, and then he would be like, all right, you know what? Like I've wasted 3 at bats trying to like make sure my hips are in the right place. Like I'm just going to try to hit this. And
it's like me golfing.
Yeah, exactly. And then you get a single. I don't think he was having like any high noons out there. like a 7th inning high noon to get his swing relaxed.
That does help.
He definitely was not doing that. I shouldn't even qualify. He was definitely not doing that. But it got better last year. He was told to, and I think his emphasis was like taking more risk because he makes really good swing decisions. He makes really he takes really good at bats, and you can also add a little more thump to your game. If you think you're going to get into a plus count, and you think you're going to get a pitch that you can hit, like be a little more reckless, like take a big swing because what's the worst that can happen? This has been all about, I think mechanically he's, in a lot better place from the last couple of years. He's a tall, athletic guy who is in the process of filling out still. And I think that what we're seeing this year is the last piece. He's not a slugger per se, but he's hitting the ball harder. He's hitting for better power, obviously. Just to pull some things, last year in limited sample in Triple-A, didn't really hit the ball super hard. I should probably have pulled up my full season list, which I will do as I'm talking, but I think the power is the last piece. It's kind of a tweener profile, part of the dream was that he would be able to do all the things he does and he'd hit for power. And then you're talking about like a left-handed Christian Yelich. And if you're not going to be like a nailed on center fielder, then the speed and contact isn't as valuable. So it's a little bit of a unique profile, but if he is hitting for power, then we're talking about a much different player.
Yeah. And that power has ticked up, like you said, 5 homers so far this year. I mean, the speed is intriguing too. The fact that he has 17 stolen bases in Norfolk. I just wonder what it would take. And we had this conversation when we were talking about Jud Fabian a couple months back. I just wonder what it would take to get him to Baltimore. I saw a lot of people talking, I think it was when I can't remember exactly who was out at that point. Maybe Mullins was still on the injured list, and some fans were clamoring to see Dylan Beavers get called up to Baltimore. And I just have a hard time seeing a spot for him because Heston Kjerstad is older. He's 3 years older. He is ahead of him. I mean, Heston Kjerstad is, like we've talked about in the first half of the podcast, he has got significant experience now in the big leagues. The Orioles have more invested in Heston Kjerstad. He's a former top 100 prospect. Dylan Beavers is a former highly drafted player, but he has never appeared in top 100s, and he's not as highly regarded as Kjerstad. I just wonder what kind of cataclysmic injuries we would have to see in order to see him in Baltimore, or maybe if this team still is well out of the playoff race come July and they trade off some pieces, maybe that opens a spot. I wonder how much the Orioles have invested in this guy and whether he is viewed more as a depth piece that they can call up if they need to, or viewed as a trade piece potentially.
Yeah, I mean, the first part of that, like, there's a couple questions there. Where's the opportunity? It's not apparent. I think that it would be pretty fascinating if it was him. If they need a left-handed hitting outfielder over Heston Kjerstad, things can happen. Heston Kjerstad can roll an ankle, and it could just be Dylan Beavers' time. I think what I'm fascinated to see, and this is not a Dylan Beavers thing. This is like an Orioles overall thing. I'm pretty sure he needs to get added to the roster this year. I assume that he will be. I mean, if he's not going to be, then he will be traded because that's right. You don't want to lose him for $50,000, whatever it is
in November.
Yeah. So I think that's his own part of the conversation. But what the hard lesson that the Orioles learned this time last year was that you need to have these guys and you want them. And the irony is that they already knew that. They were extremely proud of themselves that they hadn't traded Colton Cowser because they had too many outfielders. And then they needed Colton Cowser in April and May when Austin Hayes was dealing with some physical stuff and Cedric Mullins is kind of, dealing with the struggles he was. And then they had Colton Cowser and they were incredibly proud of themselves for not having traded him because you need as many good players as you can. And then they traded Connor Norby and Cal Stowers, and they realized that you need to have these guys. So I think that the answer to your question is like, they're going to be valuable because you don't need to do anything with them. You can do something you can trade them. I think there's going to be a lot of teams that are intrigued by Dylan Beavers for a lot of ways. I was looking, I've been looking at a couple of things as you were talking, and like, there have been some extreme left-right splits with him in the past. I don't think that's really the case anymore. He's hitting velocity much, much better than he did last year. Last year, over the 2 levels, he had a 404 OPS on fastballs over 94 miles an hour this year. I don't have an OPS, but it's 373 WOBA. Like, he's slugging 400. He's hitting 345 on them. Like, that's all good.
Yeah,
that's all really good. Those are improvements, and it suggests a player who's getting better. And we're now in this middle ground of Orioles prospects who, you're not going to have the guys this was the group that kind of marked the end of guys just shooting through.
Yeah.
Like, they all spent a very short amount of time with Jackson Holiday, and then Jackson Holiday left them all in the dust. And now these are the guys who are just going station to station and year to year and developing deliberately. And that's not to say you're not developing into a good, useful major league player. It's just you're not developing on that accelerated timeline. Is there a world where Dylan Beavers is an everyday outfielder for the Baltimore Orioles in 2026?
Yeah, maybe. I mean, there is a world where that happens.
Here's how it happens. I suppose it happens.
Lay out the scenario.
It's if Cedric Mullins is not here, whether trade the season or free agency,
or both,
it is a world where
The problem is Beavers being a left-handed bat.
yeah,
I mean, I still think the Orioles want Heston Kjerstad part of their outfield long term, but
yeah.
also given Heston Kjerstad's defensive struggles, maybe they abandon him being an outfielder.
Yeah,
long-term?
maybe he's the new Ryan O'Hearn, and then you need another, and you basically have like a second Colton Cowser out there. I think Colton Cowser is probably a different profile, but it's the same kind of thing.
It feels like a similar conversation to where is Kyle Stowers going to fit in this?
Yeah,
Because Kyle Stowers the same way. It was a similar profile in terms of left-handed hitting, mostly corner outfielder who can play center. Doesn't do any one thing ridiculously well, though Stowers' power was Stowy Powy, as we say, was pretty good. But it was just like finding a spot for that guy, because the Orioles traditionally like to have their fourth or fifth outfielder be a right-handed bat like Ramon Laureano.
Yeah. So I think that's kind of where the, kind of the point I was attempting to get at, and I don't think I actually did, is that there's no,
Because I cut you off. That was my fault.
no, it's because I was doing a bad job making it. I just think that, he might be more on the Jordan Westburg, Connor Norby, Kyle Stowers. Like, you're going to end up with like 1,000 Triple-A plate appearances, and they're probably going to be really good. And there's going to be no apparent answer for what's next for you until there is. That's not super fun to, it wasn't fun to say it about those guys. It's not going to be super fun to say it, if we're in, sitting here at this time next year, which we almost certainly will be, about like Dylan Beavers and Judd Fabian, and be like, yeah, I don't know, like, keep it up, boys. Like,
Yeah.
Hope you're having a lot of fun down there in Norfolk and like hitting snot out of the ball. But that's what's going to happen. Like, and I think that the lessons learned about the trades from last year, and we didn't get to talk about that trade stuff, but
We'll save that for next week.
yeah, we can talk about it. There's going to be a newsletter, Inside the Dugout, for the Baltimore Banner subscribers. You can subscribe for $1 for 6 months.
Nailed it.
Thank you. Where I kind of start to lay out my trade deadline thoughts. But like, I think part of it is that there's value in having guys like this. And I think that I don't think inside the warehouse, the conversation right now is going to go anywhere beyond that. It's going to be like, cool, Dylan Beavers is doing all this stuff a lot better than he did last year. I'm glad that that's happening.
Yeah, I think the scenario would really be Cedric Mullins, Ryan O'Hearn are both gone. Ramon Laureano's probably gone. Dylan Carlson's probably gone. And all four of those guys are impending free agents. But
well, Carlson, you can probably just, I think he rejoins the arbitration process.
Oh, true. No, sorry. You're right. So he is not an impending free agent, but you then have, more openings in your outfield. I just wonder if, does it really make sense for the Orioles to go with an all lefty outfield with Beavers, Cowser, and Kjerstad potentially? Who knows? These are long-term questions.
I don't think I knew that Ramon Laureano, I mean, I'm sure I did, but he has an option for next year.
Oh, I forgot about that.
I'm pretty sure I knew about that. We'll say I did. $6.5 million for Nate.
Team option, right?
Club option, yeah.
Yeah. All right.
I picked that up yesterday.
Yeah.
Even if he doesn't get a hit again for the rest of the year, I'd probably still do it. That's an exaggeration. But I don't, mainly because I don't think that would happen. But.
Yeah. We'll wait a while to see if he picks that up. All right. At John Meoli is his handle. I'm at Paul Mancano. And at All Banner Sports. Please like, rate, review, subscribe anywhere that you get the Banner Baseball Show. We will be back next week. I think eventually we will be starting to talk about the trade deadline and what the Orioles could do at said trade deadline. In the meantime, read Inside the Dugout, which John has authored for you. Danielle Allentuck, Andy Kuska, Kyle Goon have much, much more content at thebaltimorebanner.com.
Can I say something about Inside the Dugout?
Yes.
So I tried to figure out a construct to write about this, and I have like a lot of thoughts about the trade. I have a lot of thoughts about a lot of things, but there was a lot of things to sort out for the trade deadline, and I was like, all right, it's basically 6 weeks to the trade deadline. Let's do 6 things in 600 words. And I kid you not, I highlighted all 6 sections, and it was exactly 600 words.
No way.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is impressive.
I was keeping track along the way, so I knew like roughly how many words, but like not in the moment.
And then you're going to send it in, and one of our editors is going to change something.
Oh, I said, because I did that part first, and I wrote like the top, and I said, here's the construct. And by the way, I hit it exactly. No pressure, editors.
Yeah. So if they take out a word, better believe they got to add a word.
Yeah, there's going to be an editor's note that's going to be like, sorry, I had to take out. Like, yeah, sorry, you used like somebody's second reference here. Like now it's $5.99.
Then they
like,
got to just take a contraction and just make can't, cannot, something like that.
Yeah, I was pretty proud of myself.
You should be. All right. Thanks so much for tuning in. We will be back.